Well, before we talk about ASEAN, maybe a quick introduction on Malaysia first. As Malaysia is a founding member of the ASEAN, as you are probably aware, ASEAN consists of 10 member states in Southeast Asia, and Malaysia is one of those countries who is a member. Essentially, Malaysia has a population of 32 million, much more than Denmark. 24% are less than 15 years old, 69.7% are between 15 to 64 years old, and 6.2% are more than 65 years old. And we are actually a multi-ethnic country, with majority being the Bumiputera, or majority are actually Malay, with 50%, and the indigenous group. 23% Chinese, 7% Indian, and 1% of other races. So life expectancy is 72.7 for the male, and female is 77.4 years old. So a little bit on ASEAN. So ASEAN, as I mentioned earlier, consists of 10 member states. We have Brunei, Cambodia, Laos, Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Vietnam, Singapore, and Thailand. So the population makes up about 8.6% of the whole world population. So the ASEAN region basically is to be our nation outward-looking, living in peace, stability, bonded together in partnership, in dynamic development, in a community of caring society. That's the vision of ASEAN. In order to achieve this ASEAN, it is envisaged that ASEAN will be a single community in the future, a bit like EU. And in order to build this community with a motto of one vision, one identity, and one community, there are three pillars that are currently being implemented at the ASEAN level. One is through the ASEAN Political, Security, and Community. The other one is the ASEAN Economic Community, and the other pillar is the ASEAN Social, Cultural, and Community pillar. So essentially, these three pillars will form the pillars that would frame the ASEAN community in the future. So looking at food safety in ASEAN in general, if you look at the 10 different countries, they are all at different stages of development. Some are more advanced than the other. So because of this, there are some countries that their food safety system is incomplete or a bit outdated to a certain extent. There are inadequate technical capability, as well as financial, institution, and managerial food safety control capacity. There are also limited scientific capability in some countries. So in order to meet the vision of a single community, we need to actually try to narrow the gaps between the different countries as much as possible. As I mentioned, the vision is actually to be a single community and to establish a single market within ASEAN. So this would probably involve a lot of movement of food among the member states as well. So food safety is an important issue that we need to address. So these challenges in terms of this disparity, we look at inadequate capability, inadequate legislation, resources as well, and how to address food safety crisis or issues. Some of the challenges faced by the different countries. Of course, as I mentioned, there are some countries that are able to address most of this issue, but there are some that are still facing challenges on this. So in order to address this, as I mentioned, we will need to narrow the gaps among the different countries in terms of their capability and capacity in addressing food safety. And this has been addressed through the various ASEAN sectoral working group and task forces on food safety There are many that has been initiated currently, and those listed, I will not read all of them, but basically they are actually looking at issues of looking at harmonizations of standards, harmonizations of MRL, trying to have system for exchange of information, and also trying to look at rapid alert system, a bit like what EU has. So some of the achievement that we have actually been able to achieve through this different various sectoral working group and task forces include improvement in ASEAN food inspection and certification system, including we have developed a module curriculum for inspection that can be used by all ASEAN member states. We also have a system of the ASEAN Food Reference Laboratory as well. We also have currently is about to be signed on the ASEAN Sectorial Mutual Recognition Arrangement or Agreement for inspection and certification for food hygiene. So this is also something that has been achieved. In terms of risk assessment, well, I come from the ASEAN Risk Assessment Center for Food Safety, so basically this is one of the institutions that has been established recently to also look at food safety. So we are also actually currently embarking on develop an ASEAN food consumption database that will support risk assessment activities. We also have harmonization initiative that has been ongoing for quite some while. ASEAN Common Food Control Requirements we have developed. Harmonization of standards, for example, for pesticides residues within ASEAN has also been developed. We have also endorsed ASEAN food safety policy that would provide direction for ASEAN member states. So information sharing, we have an ASEAN food safety network where information are shared on legislation, regulatory requirements on the website, as well as also an ASEAN rapid alert system where any contraventions are shared among ASEAN member states. So well, it would not do justice for me to be here without elaborating a little bit on the center where I come from. So the ASEAN Risk Assessment Center basically was established to provide independent risk assessment, scientific opinion on issues of common interest within ASEAN, and to promote adoption of common positions and also common measures within ASEAN. So the function basically of the center is actually to coordinate risk assessment activities using expertise within ASEAN. So it is also used as a platform for strengthening the risk assessment for ASEAN member states. So it also facilitates information sharing and experiences as some country has capacity and capability in doing risk assessment. So it's also provided as a platform in developing a pool of qualified risk assessors to be used in the future. So as the name denotes, this center is actually established to provide services for the whole of ASEAN for risk assessment. So this is just to give you a quick introduction on how the logo and the ASEAN Risk Assessment looks like. So if you look at the information on elaboration of the logo, it has the color on your left, which is the red, yellow, and blue, which is the ASEAN color, and here it has the wording ARAC, which is ARAC. And the tubes and test tubes, and it looks like bar charts as well, denotes the scientific approach undertaken by the center. So this is a quick explanation on the logo. And this center is relatively new. It has just been launched on the 22nd of March 2016. So the role played by this center is actually to support harmonization efforts within ASEAN, and also hopefully to facilitate movement of the food within ASEAN. So this is how it actually functions. Any request will come to the Secretariat. The Secretariat of the AREC are the blue square. We actually have three components: the Secretariat, the Scientific Committee, and also the Scientific Panel. So these are the three major components of the center. The Secretariat provides the support to the two committees, which are the Scientific Committee and the Scientific Panel. So Secretariat provides support to the work done by the committee. So essentially, the committee is actually represented by every member state. So we have 10 member states, so there are 10 members in the Scientific Committee. And this committee does not carry out risk assessment work, but they make decisions on whether risk assessment should be carried out through the requests coming in, depending on availability of information and data. And the Scientific Committee is the one that will select members to form the panel. So we don't have permanent panels like what EFSA has, but the panel will be established on a need basis when there's work to be done. And this panel are selected from a directory which we have actually established, a directory of risk assessors from ASEAN member states. So once the outcome from the panel is finished, the risk assessment output goes back for endorsement by the Scientific Committee before it's being given back to the requesting body. So this is how AREC functions. So if with all these efforts that we have actually done in many of the activities, now is the time that ASEAN is actually trying to look at how do we integrate all this activity into something that is more binding and more integrated. So that's how we are actually now trying to look at those initiatives that has already been established are all in yellow. So you can see that we have mutual recognition arrangement, ASEAN Common Food Control Requirements, we have the reference laboratory, we have the risk assessment center, we have harmonization on certain aspects that has been done, we have the information sharing through the network as well as the rapid alert system. So now with the food safety policy providing the clear direction on how this should be better integrated, ASEAN now is actually now embarking on developing an ASEAN food safety regulatory framework. So this will be a binding legal document that will bind all 10 member states, and that would integrate all this initiative under one framework. So this is an initiative that we have just started, and it will probably take a few years before we actually see the fruits of this initiative. So this is what we are actually trying to do at the ASEAN level, and hopefully with this regulatory framework, the intra-ASEAN trade of safe food will be better facilitated. So this is just, I'll give you a quick overrun of the ASEAN food safety policy. There are actually basically 10 principles, and most of these principles are adopted internationally as well. So I won't run through all of this one by one, but essentially there are actually 10, looking at issues from addressing the food chain, the risk assessment, risk analysis, transparency issue, harmonization, recognition issues, and information sharing, and the rest of it. So this regulatory framework, as I mentioned, will provide the legal binding framework to integrate everything into one. So in conclusion, there are many activities on food safety that has already been carried out, and this initiative has facilitated in enhancing the capacity of ASEAN in improving food safety. And now it has established the base for us to look at regional integration towards ASEAN community by 2025, which is still a long way to go. So with that, thank you very much.